I used to think loyalty was a family heirloom, stitched tight, softened by years, something you held when the world felt brittle. In our house, it looked like 5 a.m. coffee at the family diner, splitting light tip jars fairly, and turning the safe key at closing with the reverence other people saved for prayer. My brother, Lucas, wore loyalty like a leather jacket. He'd walk me home after late shifts, fix sputtering coffee machines with a butter knife, and lean across the pass-through to steal the last bite of my pancakes if he decided I looked tired. He was reckless and brilliant, my favorite person and my permanent problem, sometimes both in the same hour. So, when the sirens washed our dining room in blue and red, when Officer Grant said my full name like it belonged in a file folder, I still thought it had to be a mistake. "Emily Hart?" he said. "We need you to come with us." It was a Thursday afternoon. I was still wearing my apron, still smelling like bacon grease and lemony cleaner. Dad came out from the back office with his jaw set. Mom stopped folding napkins. Lucas stood by the pie case, hands in his pockets, staring at the lemon meringue like he could fall in. "What is happening?" I asked. My voice sounded flat, like it had been ironed. $38,000 is missing from last night's deposits. Sign-out logs put you in the office last. We're going to ask you a few questions at the station. I looked at Lucas. He always met me halfway. He didn't meet me now. His eyes dropped to a smudge of whipped cream on the glass. "They're wrong," I said. "Tell them, Luke." He cleared his throat. "Just go answer their questions, Em." At the station, the room was cold and clean. The detective slid a printout across the table, time-stamped ledger lines, the safe log, my signature. The office camera had captured me at 10:09 p.m., pen in hand, and then the footage glitched to snow for 12 minutes. When it returned, I was locking the safe. It was the kind of coincidence that would make you laugh if you weren't sitting under fluorescent lights with your wrists shaking. "I didn't take it," I said. "It's my family's money." "That's what makes it easy," the detective said. "No broken windows." They let me go while they sorted a few things out, which is a phrase that tells you nothing at all. Outside, the clouds were heavy and low, like the sky was waiting to drop. I walked back to the diner in a colder version of the town I'd always known. The bells on the door chimed the same way, but it sounded like a recording of itself. Mom sat in a booth twisting a napkin until it frayed. Dad was gone. Lucas wiped a perfectly clean counter. He looked up just enough to make it hurt. "Tell me you didn't." "I didn't. They have your signature. Then someone forged it. People do stupid things when they're desperate. I'm not desperate." He set the rag down carefully. "Dad's behind again. Taxes, the new stove. We got letters." "That's not a reason to frame me." Nobody said frame. Nobody had to. I could hear it in the carefulness of his voice, in the way he was choosing words like he was picking his way across black ice. There's a language families speak that never makes it into books, whole paragraphs in the lift of an eyebrow or the way someone won't meet your eyes. In that language, he was saying, "Pick a story we can all live with." I went home and pulled the office camera feed from the cloud, scrubbing through with the grim patience of a person watching herself drown. Static at 10:09. Static until 10:21. When the picture blinked back, the safe was shut. Before the glitch, reflected in the office window, I caught a shape crossing the hall at 10:05. Just a smear of movement, a shoulder and a jaw. Familiar because I'd seen them in mirrors next to my own for most of my life. I tried to tell myself it could be anyone, but we grew up 6 inches apart in a small house with thin walls. I knew my brother's walk the way I knew the weight of my own name. At dawn, I went back to the diner with a thermos of coffee and a list of small, rational things to do. Check the spare key, check the deposit bag log, check the trash. The spare key lived in a blue envelope taped under the bottom desk door. "If anything ever happens to me," Dad liked to say, tapping the drawer and not finishing the sentence because superstition was a flavor in our house. The envelope was gone. The room tilted. I crouched on the carpet with my hands pressed to the floor like I needed to confirm that gravity still worked. When I stood, Lucas was in the doorway, rolling his truck keys around one finger, metal clicking like a metronome. "Didn't expect you here," he said. "Where's the blue envelope?" "What envelope?" "The one you took." He laughed, but it wasn't how he laughed. It was a laugh he had borrowed from a tougher man. "You're losing it, Em." He reached past me and tugged the drawer like we were both in some improv show. "See? Nothing." I watched his throat. There's this thing he does when he lies. His Adam's apple jumps like it's trying to escape. It jumped. I had 1,000 words for him, and none of them felt like a bridge we could both cross without falling. I said, "Just tell me why. If you needed money—" He went still. The keys stopped their little orbit. "Don't preach. You don't know everything." "You're right. Tell me the part I don't know." He stared like I'd asked him to dig his own grave. Then he walked away. I called the bank. The night manager, a woman named Jess, who once came in for pie after a breakup, said the deposits hadn't hit because the bag never arrived. She sounded sorry in the way you sound when a storm is already inside someone else's house. She said, "The cameras on our side show no drop between 10 and midnight. I'm sorry, Emily." I made a list. Lists are scaffolding when the building starts to buckle. Who had access? Where could $38,000 go in 12 minutes? I went through the trash and found a coil of blue tape like the tape that used to hold the envelope. It smelled like lemon cleaner and guilt. By noon, I had one other truth I didn't want. The detective called and said, gently, that the signature on the log looked like mine, because it was mine. He'd had it compared against an old application I'd filled for a county grant the first year we tried to replace the grill. Same curvature on the H. Same impatient way I crossed my T's, like I was shooing a fly. "Maybe you signed early," he said. "Maybe you were distracted." "I don't sign things by accident," I said. "Not with the safe." After I hung up, I stared at my hands. They looked capable of anything. That night, the diner was quieter than usual. The way a house gets quiet right before it breaks. A man I didn't recognize came in for coffee and left half of it untouched. A girl in a soccer uniform tied and retied her ponytail with both feet on the seat, like she was trying to run away without moving. I kept looking at the door, expecting the police again, or Lucas with a confession, or my father with an explanation big enough to make everything small. Instead, my phone buzzed. "Lucas, meet me at the storage unit, alone." We rented Unit 23 when I was 13 for Christmas decorations and crates of old menus and the chairs Dad swore we'd need if the town ever got busy enough to justify a line. It smelled like dust and cinnamon. When I got there, Lucas was already inside with the light on, a stack of old invoice boxes open on the floor. "This isn't what you think," he said. Then he pushed a folder toward me. Inside were final notices from a rehab center I didn't know he'd gone to, a payday loan agreement with an obscene interest rate, and a photograph of Lucas with a skinny man in a suit who looked like a dentist and a shark at the same time. "His name's Mancuso," Lucas said. "I owed him. He said I could work it off. But then it ballooned. I thought if I could get ahead, I could pay it before Dad found out." My mouth dried. "You took the cash." He didn't answer fast. He lifted a hand like he could slow the words down on their way to me. He said, "I took something else first. Your driver's license. Your social. I used your name to take out a line of credit 2 months ago. It covered the first debt, and then the payment came due and He swallowed. "I told myself I'd fix it before you ever knew. I told myself a lot of things." My eyes blurred. It would have been cleaner if he'd punched me. I said, "You sold me." The words came out soft and wrong. "You sold me on paper." It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that. He stepped toward me and I stepped back because some part of me believed that if he got close enough, he could talk his way into my bones. He looked small for the first time since we were kids.
Mancuso found out about the diner. He sent a guy to sit at table 8 for 3 days. He knew the routine. I didn't have a choice. There were 100 choices between here and that door. You just didn't make any of them. He scrubbed his face. I can fix it if we sell the motorcycle and stop saying we. He flinched. In the hall, somebody's radio droned a baseball game, a crowd roaring very far away. I put the papers back in the folder because my hands needed something to do that wasn't hitting him. I said, "Give me the truth, all of it." He closed his eyes. He said, "I took the cash. I was going to put it back after the weekend when a buddy paid me for a job. I just needed to get Mancuso off me long enough to breathe. Where is it?" "Gone." He looked ashamed of the word. "He took it yesterday morning." "How?"
I told him it would be in the deposit bag. He said to take it out and leave the bag in the safe so it looked fine. Then he sent a guy to pick it up from me, and he drove away like we were finished. "You did all of that while I was on camera in the office?" He nodded. I made the camera glitch. My brain reached for explanations like a hand in the dark for a switch. How? He tripped the breaker on the hallway line. It takes the system 12 minutes to reboot. You knew that. My voice sounded like it belonged to someone practical and calm. You knew because you installed the new system. Emily. I put the folder under my arm. You're going to tell Dad tonight, before I do. You're going to show him these papers, then we're going to the police. And if I don't, then I will, and I'll bring this. I tapped the folder. He stared at me like he was measuring what I was worth. Somewhere in the calculations, I could see a little boy with a split lip, a teenager with a court date, a grown man who still believed he could charm a snake. Mancuso won't let it be the police. He'll come after you. Then he should meet me in a place with a lot of cameras. Go. Tell Dad. Dad didn't tell anything that night. He stared at Lucas for a long time like he was trying to read a map in a language he didn't know anymore. Then he said, "We take care of our own," which was the prayer and the curse of our family. "No," I said, surprising myself with how steady the word came out. "We tell the truth, or the truth tells on us." Mom cried. Dad paced. Lucas sat with his head in his hands and said he'd go to the police in the morning, like confession could rewind time. In the end, Dad sent me upstairs to sleep and walked Lucas out to the truck. I watched from the window through a crack in the curtain. They hugged, quick and hard. Dad slipped something into Lucas's hand. I couldn't see what it was, but my stomach knew. Another chance he hadn't earned. I set an alarm for 3 a.m. and another for 4. At 3:17, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. It was a screenshot of my credit report, the new line item like a bruise. The message read, "Payment missed, 48 hours. Then, a minute later, "We can solve this if you're smart." I stared at it until the letters blurred. Then I did the most unheart thing I'd ever done. I called the detective in the middle of the night. "Do you want to make a case?" I asked when he picked up. "I want the truth," he said. "Then meet me at the diner tomorrow at 9 and bring more cameras." By noon, we had a plan that felt like a cartoon anvil. Obvious, heavy, likely to hurt someone no matter what. The detective wired the office and the alley with additional cameras. He put a microphone under the lip of the counter at table 8, which made me laugh once and then not again, because it had been Mancuso's table. We swapped the deposit bag for a decoy, banded stacks of paper cut to the size of cash, a tracker the detective insisted was totally legal, and a strip of dye that would burst on contact with air. "Will it work?" I asked. "It'll work or it won't, but we'll have something, and right now you have nothing." We needed Mancuso to show up. That part fell to Lucas. He had to send the text. The kind of text you don't send unless you've been sending them for a while. He stared at his phone like it owed him money. "If I do this," he said, "you don't let them hurt him." I didn't promise anything. I wanted the hurting to stop. Full stop. I wanted a life where I could fry bacon and refill coffee and not worry that every sound outside was a man in a suit with my name in his mouth. Lucas typed, he deleted, he typed again. Finally, he held the phone up so I could see. Can square up tonight. After close. Office. Cash on hand. Her too, so you know it's clean. Her, I said. That's me. I'm sorry, he said. It landed like everything else, too late. Closing time came and went, and the diner was empty except for us and the detective and two officers who looked like they wished they were anywhere else. The lights were low. The pie case hummed like a nervous animal. At 10:03 p.m., someone cut the hallway breaker, and the cameras flickered, and then came back on, redundancies humming. Lucas blinked because he hadn't known we'd fixed that part. At 10:05 p.m., a man in a gray suit walked in like he'd booked a table. He was tidy the way knives are tidy. He smiled, and it didn't go to his eyes. "Mancuso," Lucas said, every syllable tight. Mancuso's gaze slid to me. He grinned like we shared an inside joke. "Emily," he said, tasting my name. "Nice to finally meet the asset." The detective, out of sight in the back booth, didn't move. I kept my hands on the counter. The decoy bag sat under my palm. The microphone under the edge of the laminate listened harder than anyone ever had. "You brought my money," Mancuso said. "I brought a bag. You'll get it when you say out loud that I didn't take anything from my family." He laughed. "This isn't church. You don't get absolution for free." "I don't need absolution. I need evidence." I tilted my chin toward the office. "You instructed Lucas to pull the cash and leave the bag. He told you when the cameras would glitch. He used my name to open a line of credit. You know that because you helped him fill out the application. You said it would spread the risk. Say that for the room." His smile thinned. He glanced at the hallway camera and then at Lucas. "You brought cops to a family conversation." "You brought extortion to a family business," I said. He stepped closer. It put him nearly under the microphone. "You think you're the first idiot to try a gotcha?" he said softly. "I've outlived 3 task forces and a man who tried to wear a wire in my car. You want me on tape? I'll give you something to play for your friends." He leaned in. "You're cute, Emily. Smart, too. But you sign where I tell you to sign, when I tell you, and this goes away. Or I put your social out on a list and let the world eat you one click at a time." My throat went narrow. Fear can make you pitch forward or backward. I forced myself to stay exactly still. "Say it," I said. "Say you told Lucas to take the money." He considered, weighing something invisible. Then he shrugged, the little flourish of a man who enjoyed his own audacity. "Fine," he said. "I told your brother to empty the bag and leave the bag. I told him when to kill the cameras, and he did it like he'd been practicing. He's better at following orders than you are." The detective stood. The officers moved like the room was a chessboard and someone had said their names. Mancuso clocked them a second too late. He went for the bag. I let it go because that was the choreography. He grabbed, slashed, and the dye pack burst, staining his hands a bright, accusing blue. He froze, startled, as if shame had a color he hadn't considered. "Mr. Mancuso," the detective said, "I'd like you to keep talking." He didn't. He ran. They caught him in the alley because pride makes people slow. The officer's radio crackled with words like Miranda and possession of fraudulent instruments and extortion. And for the first time in 2 days, I breathed without feeling like I was stealing something. Lucas sank onto a stool. "He's going to jail," he said. "You're going to tell the truth," I said. "And then you're going to see what's left." The truth took longer than one night. It took a recorded statement and a lawyer we couldn't afford
and boxes of receipts Mom kept like talismans. It took admitting to things I would have preferred stayed dark. The detective came back with updates that felt like weather reports. Mancuso had priors. The wire picked up enough. The dye pack counted as tampering. There'd be charges, and not just for him. 2 weeks later, the DA called me herself. She said, "We're not charging you. The evidence is clear." Clear and also muddy. People in town looked at me with complicated eyes. Some apologized without words. Some asked if we were hiring, less like they needed hours and more like they wanted to be on the right side of a fence they couldn't see. Dad aged a decade in a weekend. He came to the diner at night and sat in the dark like he was waiting for a set to change. His voice was thin when he said, "I thought loyalty meant keeping the roof on. I didn't know it meant telling the fire department when the kitchen is burning." Mom baked pies she didn't have orders for. We ate lemon meringue for breakfast like communion. Lucas took a plea. He didn't ask me to visit before sentencing, which was exactly right and still broke my heart. On the day he was led from the courtroom in cuffs, he turned to look for us and found me and said, "I'm sorry," with his mouth, and "I'm going," with his eyes. The judge gave him 18 months. It felt like both too long and nowhere near enough. There isn't a sentence long enough to run a mile in a family. People like to say forgiveness is a decision, like a signature you put on a line. They don't tell you it's a muscle that shakes. I forgave him in the morning sometimes, and then took it back by noon when the mail came with my name on a collection notice for a debt that wasn't mine. I forgave him when Mom laughed at something bad on TV. I didn't forgive him when Dad had to sell the motorcycle to pay legal fees. I forgave him when I cleaned the coffee machine filter and found one of his old jokes. He once left a sticky note that said, "This machine only accepts compliments," and I laughed like it was the first time I'd seen it. At night, after we closed, I replayed the first part over and over. Could I have cut it off sooner? Could I have seen the arc of the lie? There's a difference between being fooled and choosing not to know. I was afraid of the second answer. The thing about a diner is you can chart a year by the condiments people use. Mustard means Little League season. Ketchup is summer tourists. Hot sauce is the college kids back for fall. By winter, I could breathe while I worked again. I could pour coffee without counting to 38,000 in my head. When people asked how I was, I said better, and meant not broken. The week before Lucas got out, he wrote me a letter. Not a text, not a call, a real letter in his slanted, impatient handwriting. It said, "I thought I was the kind of man who could fix things he broke if he moved fast enough. Turns out I'm the kind of man who breaks things trying to fix them fast. I used to think you were the careful one and I was the brave one, but you stood up when I was huddled under a lie. That's the only brave thing that happened in this whole mess. I don't deserve a sister. If you want me to disappear, I'll go. But I'm getting out with a program. I've got a counselor who says I should make a list of the ways I am going to be different. Number 1 is tell the truth before it rots. Number 2 is pay back what I owe, even if it takes the rest of my life. Number 3 is don't ask Emily to carry anything for me ever again." I cried. I yelled at the letter. I folded it into a crane and then unfolded it because adults don't make origami out of apologies. I put it on the mantle because sometimes you keep the hard things where you can see them so you don't pretend they never existed. He came by a week later with his hat in his hands like a cliché he had earned. He looked smaller and older and clean in a way that made me want to throw up and hug him at the same time. "I'm not here to ask," he said. "I'm here to tell you I have a job. Not here. Construction 2 towns over. I'll send money to Dad every month until I've paid back what my debts did to us. I'll leave if you want me to. I'll stay if you tell me how." I said, "You can bus tables on Saturdays," and then I put a hand over my mouth because I hadn't known I was going to say it. "You can scrub the grill on Sundays. You can keep your eyes on the counter when the register opens. You can be the person who locks the safe with both hands." He nodded. "I can try." "Trying is not the same as doing," I said, and it sounded meaner out loud than it did in my head. But it's the only first step I believe in anymore. He did the work like someone who had learned that wanting was not a plan. He took out the trash without being asked. He learned the names of the new regulars and practiced them like lines. He stood next to me at closing and didn't touch the safe. The first time I handed him the key to lock the front door, something in my chest tried to leap, and something else told it to sit. He locked in. He handed the key back without looking at it, like you do with a sacred thing. We didn't talk about Mancuso. I didn't ask for details about what jail felt like. He didn't ask for updates about my credit. Some things you clean with bleach and hot water, some things you sand until they're smooth, some things you live with, like a squeaky step that you stop hearing after a while. Spring rolled in smelling like wet dirt and possibility. The bank called to say the fraudulent line had been closed and the last of the mess untangled. I felt something uncoil in me that had been pulled tight for so long, I'd forgotten it had another shape. That Sunday, after church let out and filled the diner with dresses and clip-on ties, Dad stood at table 2 and cleared his throat, our family's version of a drum roll. He announced, "We're doing a breakfast special. It's called the Blue Hands because we're not afraid of stains anymore." People laughed. Lucas blushed. I found myself laughing too. The sound new and also from the old days. After the rush, we stood in the back and Dad put a hand on each of our shoulders. He said, "I'm too old to hold roofs on by myself. If something's on fire, you call it fire. You don't call it weather." Okay, we can do that.
You want the explosive part? The teachable twist? Here it is. My brother didn't become a better person because he got caught. He became a better person because he started telling the truth one sentence at a time. The lies tried to multiply in silence. The truth sounded awkward at first, and then less so. It wore comfortable shoes. The other twist is about me. I always thought I was loyal because I would stand in a kitchen while the ceiling sagged and say we were fine. Turns out, loyalty is opening the windows and yelling for the neighbors when you smell smoke. It's putting your own name back in your own mouth and refusing to let anyone else spend it. On the anniversary of the day the sirens came, I took the old blue envelope from my pocket. I had found it behind the file cabinet, empty, a ghost of what it used to hold. I taped it under the drawer again, not because I liked the history, but because I like traditions when they've learned something. I wrote a note and slid it inside. If anything ever happens to me, tell the truth first. When Lucas walked out of prison 18 months later, I was waiting. Not because I had promised him, not because I owed him, but because I wanted to see with my own eyes whether he'd look different in daylight. He did. Prison had pressed him flat, like pages in a book left under a heavy stone. He was thinner, with a quiet edge in his eyes, the kind you don't get from sleepless nights, but from knowing what people can do when they're desperate. He carried a paper bag with his few belongings and a folded letter from a counselor who thought he was ready for reintegration. He stopped when he saw me. For a second, I thought he might smile. He didn't. He just said, "You came." I did. We walked in silence to the truck Dad had lent me. I drove. Lucas stared out the window like the horizon might tell him something he needed to know. At the diner, people noticed. Of course they did. Small towns are barometers. They register every shift in the air. Mrs. Green from the florist's paused with her pie fork halfway to her mouth. The college kids whispered over onion rings. Even the coffee machine hissed louder like it disapproved. Lucas put on an apron and started bussing tables without asking. I let him. Dad didn't say much beyond, "Don't scratch the counter." Mom cried into a dish towel when no one was looking. I wanted to believe he was back for real, but belief is expensive once it's been stolen. 2 weeks later, a man I didn't recognize came in. He was clean-cut, in a gray jacket, with a smile too polite for our kind of place. He ordered black coffee and didn't touch it. My skin prickled. When he left, Lucas's face had gone white. "Who was that?" I asked. "Nobody." The way his Adam's apple jumped told me everything I needed to know. He was lying. Again.
Later that night, I found a note slipped under the back door. Just one line, block letters. Mancuso may be gone, but debts don't disappear. My stomach turned to glass.
The past has a way of echoing. I told myself we'd cut Mancuso out of our story, but it turned out he had understudies, people who'd learned his script. They wanted the same thing he always wanted: money. Lucas admitted it 3 days later. We were in the alley taking out trash when he finally cracked. They came to me inside, he said, voice low. Said I owed them because I was Mancuso's account. Doesn't matter that he's locked up. Debt travels. How much? I asked. He didn't look at me. 20. 20 what? 1,000. I almost laughed, except nothing was funny. We don't have 20,000. They know that, he said. That's why they're leaning. They figure pressure makes diamonds. They figure wrong. For days, I lived in double vision. One eye on the register, one eye on the door. Every unfamiliar face set my pulse racing. Dad noticed me checking locks 3 times. Mom baked more pies than anyone could eat. Lucas worked harder than I'd ever seen, but the shadow followed him everywhere. One night around closing, I caught him outside by the dumpster on the phone. His shoulders hunched like he was trying to make himself smaller. No, he whispered. Not here. Not her. When he came back inside, I was waiting. You don't get to drag me through this again. His face crumpled. I'm trying to fix it. Then fix it the right way. Tell the detective. Tell somebody who can shut them down. He shook his head. You don't understand how these people work. I understand how lies work. We stared at each other, the air between us thick with the weight of all the things we'd never unsay. The next note came, pinned to our door one morning. Last warning, pay or we collect differently. I didn't need anyone to translate differently. That afternoon, I went to the detective myself. He listened, scribbled, frowned. He said, they're testing him. Testing you. See if you'll fold. And if we don't? Then they get bolder. But it also makes them sloppy. That's when we catch them. It was déjà vu. Except this time I wasn't the accused. This time I was bait again, whether I liked it or not. The setup was simple. Too simple. A meeting, after hours, at the diner. A fake payment. Hidden microphones. Cameras in the alley. I swore I wouldn't let it happen twice, and yet here I was, watching Lucas pace while the clock ticked toward danger. You don't have to do this, I told him. Yes, I do, because if I don't, they'll never stop coming, and you'll never stop looking at me like I'm a loaded gun on the counter. He wasn't wrong. They came in pairs. 2 men, sharp suits, dead eyes. One carried a briefcase, like this was a boardroom instead of a family diner. Mr. Hart, the taller one said, nodding at Lucas. Payment ready? Lucas slid the bag across the counter. Inside, stacked bills that were really blank slips with trackers. I kept my hand near the register, though I didn't know what I'd do if they reached for me. The taller man unzipped the bag. His partner scanned the room. My heart was hammering so loud, I thought it would give us away. Then he froze. His gaze snagged on the corner booth, on the detective. Cops, he hissed. The taller man snapped the bag shut and grabbed Lucas by the arm. You just signed your family's death warrant, he spat. But before he could drag him out, officers swarmed in from the alley. Shouts, metal clatter, the briefcase hitting the floor, blue dye burst across the taller man's hands, blooming like a flag. It was over in seconds. Afterward, the detective said, this should cut the line for good. But you know as well as I do, shadows linger. He wasn't wrong. For weeks, I woke up at the sound of every car door. Lucas slept on the couch, claiming he liked the TV home, but I knew it was because he was afraid to be alone. Still, something shifted. Not trust, not yet, but maybe the outline of trust. He showed up every morning, worked until his hands blistered, didn't flinch when people stared. He even started writing down every cent he earned and spent, a paper trail of promises. One night, as we closed, he handed me a notebook.
My list, he said. Inside, page after page of neat writing. Every debt he'd repaid, every hour he'd worked, every dollar he planned to earn. At the end, one line stood out. I will not sell my sister ever again. I pressed the notebook shut, blurring the ink. Maybe redemption isn't one big act. Maybe it's 1,000 small ones, stacked like coffee cups, breakable but real. I don't know if Lucas will ever be the brother I once believed in, but I know this. He's not the boy who hid behind my name anymore. He's standing in front of it, trying to shield it even when the shadows press close. And for now, that's enough.
I thought the storm had passed. After Mancuso's men were taken down, after Lucas came back with his head bowed and his hands blistered from real work, I thought maybe, finally, we could start breathing like ordinary people. But the thing about storms is they leave debris, and debris has sharp edges. It started with whispers in town, customers leaning close over their pie plates, eyes flicking toward me. A man at the counter murmured to his wife, "That's her, the one who almost went to prison." A kid in a hoodie left a note on the tip tray. How much for loyalty? I crumpled it with shaking fingers, but the words clung to me like smoke. Lucas noticed. "Ignore them," he said. "I can't," I replied. The truth is, scars talk louder than bandages. One night as we closed, I found an envelope taped to the back door. No stamp, no name. Inside was a phonograph of me locking the safe, grainy and recent. On the back, in thick black marker, "Mancuso is gone, but his friends aren't." I felt my breath snag. Lucas read it, and his face drained of color. "Who?" I whispered. He swallowed. "His old partner, guy named Caro. He's worse than Mancuso. Quieter, smarter." I stared at him. "And you didn't think to tell me this?" "I thought," he faltered. "I thought maybe he'd forget me." "Criminals don't forget, they collect." Caro made his move a week later. He didn't storm in with threats. He slipped into our lives like smoke under a door. The first time, he sent one of his men, a man in a perfect suit, ordering coffee he never touched. He left a note under the saucer. "Pay what Lucas owes, or the sister bleeds next." Lucas crumpled it before Dad could see, but I grabbed it from his fist. My hands shook. I said, "You promised me." "I know." His voice was hoarse. "But promises don't erase debts." I went to the detective again. He listened, nodding, but his eyes were tired. "Caro's a different animal. He doesn't slip up like Mancuso. He uses other people, layers between him and the crime. So what do we do?" He sighed. "We wait. We catch him in the act. Until then, be careful." Be careful, as if I hadn't been living careful for years. Days blurred into nights. Every shadow outside felt like eyes. I double-locked the door until my hands blistered. Lucas worked harder than ever, but the tension clung to him. I'd catch him staring out the window, jaw tight, as if expecting a bullet. Then, one morning, the police showed up. Not for him, for me. The officer slid a warrant across the counter. "Emily Hart, you're under investigation for fraudulent credit activity." My stomach lurched. "What?" "Your name is on new applications, cards, loans, thousands of dollars." "That's not me." But it was my signature. Again. Lucas's face turned gray. "Caro," he whispered. I knew he was right. Caro had learned from Mancuso's mistakes. Why threaten with guns when paper could ruin faster, quieter? I fought the charges, but fighting meant living in suspicion all over again. Town gossip bloomed like mold. Maybe she really did take the first money. Maybe it runs in the family. Dad stopped looking people in the eye. Mom prayed louder. Lucas clenched his fists until his knuckles bled. One night, I found him pacing the alley, muttering, "I'll fix it," he said. "You'll make it worse." "You don't understand. Caro won't stop unless—" He broke off. "Unless what?" He looked at me with eyes I didn't recognize.
unless I stop him first. The next days were chaos. Lucas disappeared for hours, coming back with bruised knuckles and no answers. I begged him to tell me. He wouldn't. Finally, he admitted it. I met him. My blood turned to ice. What? He wanted me to work for him, run errands. He said if I did, he'd wipe the debt. And you believed him? I didn't have a choice. You always have a choice. That's what you never learned. He looked at me broken. Maybe this is the only way I can pay it back.
That night, I found another note on the door. This one was short. He's mine now. Stay out of it or you're next. I sat at the kitchen table with it in my hands, shaking. For years, I had been the one dragged into his lies. Now I had to decide, watch him fall again or pull him out, even if it meant burning myself. I made my choice. The detective warned me. Caro isn't like the others. He won't play into stings. He keeps his hands clean. Then I'll get him dirty, I said. He raised an eyebrow. How? With the one thing he wants most, control. We staged it carefully. Lucas agreed, though it nearly tore him apart. He would meet Caro again, pretend to comply. I would be there, hidden, with eyes and ears recording. The night came heavy with rain. Caro entered like a shadow made flesh. Impeccable suit, calm smile. He sat across from Lucas, speaking softly. You're a useful boy, but loyalty is a debt. You either pay it or it pays you. Lucas nodded, trembling. I can do it. Whatever you need. Caro leaned closer. Good, because next time it's not your sister's name we use. It's her life. That was it. The sentence we needed. The detective moved in, faster than thunder. Officers swarmed. Caro didn't flinch, just smiled, like he'd expected it. But the recorder in my pocket held his words, clear as glass. The trial took months. Caro's lawyers twisted and snarled, but the evidence stuck. Fraud, extortion, conspiracy. He was colder than Mancuso, but colder men leave clearer fingerprints. When the verdict came, guilty on all counts, I thought I would feel victory. Instead, I felt tired. So tired I wanted to sleep for a year. Lucas cried in the hallway outside court. Not loud, just tears, running silently, like something finally cracked open. I almost lost you again, he whispered. You did, but you got me back. Life didn't snap back to normal. Normal was gone, maybe forever, but it stitched itself slowly, like a wound closing ragged. People in town started nodding at me again. Some even said sorry without saying the word. Dad stood taller, Mom baked fewer pies, and Lucas, he worked, day by day, like redemption was a job with no days off. He kept the books, scrubbed the floors, locked the safe with steady hands. One night, he left a note on the counter for me. Simple, scrawled. I'm not selling you out anymore. I'm buying us back. I held it until my fingers smudged the ink. Maybe we'll never be the family we were, but maybe we can be something else. Something harder, truer. A family that knows what betrayal costs and still chooses to rebuild. And maybe that's the bravest thing of all.